Yo, hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Today is a very exciting, it's a great day for all of sports as we have the Masters on right now. And if you're following that, you have Tiger Woods, who really hasn't played competitive golf in, a year and a half, 500 some odd days, playing really, really well. And that's a great thing for golf, all things considered. In addition to that, of course, today is a huge day for all of baseball. It is the MLB 2022 opening day. And as of the recording of this video, the first game of the 2022 season is currently underway, which includes the Milwaukee Brewers playing the Chicago Cubs. So a great day for all of sports, a great day for golf with Tiger Woods being back, and of course a great day for baseball in itself. And that's why we're here in this particular video. We're here today to talk about MLB DFS specifically. If you haven't already, you're going to want to check out a previous DFS Primer video I put out just yesterday actually, where I cover in a two-part video, this being the second, but the first part, which again you want to check out, it should be linked somewhere on the screen here for you guys to click and go back to. But that particular video in and of itself is a resource-based video. I give you a general idea of MLB DFS, what you need to know coming into this 2022 season, some of the things that have changed from previous years, as well as some of the resources that I think you should be using. In fact, I would almost guarantee you should be using as you build out your lineups and try to set yourself up to build successful tournament, cash game, whatever winning lineups. I give you all of that information in the previous video. But as promised, this is a two-part series with the DFS Primer. This again being the second video of that two-part series. And in this video, we're actually going to build some lineups. Or more importantly, we're going to go through the process that I use and that I've used for several years now, the strategies I've implemented to build successful, consistent winning lineups. And again, this is going to be a little bit of a grind if you follow along here. I do put in a lot of work. I do enjoy the work, which makes me probably a little bit crazy, but you kind of have to. Yes, you can pay for websites, you can pay for advice, you come on YouTube and find a lot of different videos giving you picks, but truly to understand the sport, understand DFS, and to put yourself in the best position possible, you need to use everything. So those videos, those sources are great, but you also have to do a little bit of your own research, and that's what I'm going to show you, at least how I do my research up front on a particular slate in selecting pitchers and selecting stacks and kind of everything in between. So hopefully this series of DFS Primer videos is helpful to you guys. If it is, the only thing I ask, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you give these videos a like. They're meant to be evergreen, meaning you can watch them now. You can watch them in 3 weeks, a month down the road for postseason baseball or even next season. I will put out videos every year, of course, and kind of update anything that's changed. But in general, they're meant to be evergreen and helpful in terms of helping you guys build better lineups and put yourself in a successful position, or at least a position to be successful, I should say. So again, if you enjoy them, make sure you're subscribed, give these videos a like, share it, comment, all that nonsense. It does go a long way in helping smaller creators like myself, and I put in a lot of time here, so it does go a long way in helping me out here. But I won't waste any more time. Again, in this video, we're going to be talking about strategies, kind of the step-by-step process that I go through each and every time I plan to dedicate money to a particular slate. Whether that's tournaments or cash games, I go through this same strategy, these same steps in general when setting lineups. So let's get into it. So you guys can see here, I've listed this out in 7 steps. Now, it took a little while to figure this out. Not that I don't do this or that this isn't the exact process I go through, but to actually, buckle it down to individual steps and categorize it between what you see here as 7 steps was a little difficult. There are a lot of things that you can fit in, ancillary things that you can fit in between each and every step. There are some steps that you can kind of flip and you can do one before the other. A lot of this can be tailored to whatever you guys like, but in general, I'm going to cover again how I go through my daily routine and getting ready for a particular slate, and that includes getting pitchers that I want to pitch or use as my starting pitcher, as well as the stacks and the pitchers that I want to go against. But again, there's a lot of little things in between here. I'm not going to talk about ownership. I'm not going to talk about trying to be contrarian or any of that type of stuff. I'm just going to go through the general idea, the general strategy that I use and implement when selecting my players and building my lineups. So you can see here, starting with number 1, the first thing I do every single day, or at least every day, every slate that I plan to play, is I'm going to research that particular slate's pitchers. pitchers. Literally before anything else, before weather, before Vegas, before anything, I want to know which pitchers are projected to start for that day. This can be difficult. Unlike other sports, and we talked about this in the other video, you really only know a day or two in advance on pitchers. Bats are even much later than that. It's going to be the day of. But in terms of pitchers, yes, there are projections in terms of, you can even look on ESPN and they can project out 3, 4, 5 days down the road who's going to be a particular slate or day starting pitcher for a team, but it can change drastically. So it is kind of difficult to get ahead of the curve here in terms of preparation, but in general, once a guy has pitched, you have the data behind him and you can figure out when he's going to pitch next, you can start to get a head start on this. But let's, for the sake of this video, let's say you pick a particular slate, and let's take today's slate in general. Yeah, it's already underway, but we're going to start researching who is actually going to start for each team today. That is the first step overall that I take in each and every prep stage. Now, that includes gathering those projected starters and kind of categorizing them all together under that particular slate. You want to utilize fan graphs. I talked about it in the previous video, but that is where you're going to pull individual pitcher data. If you want to pay for another source or go somewhere else, by all means do it, but Fangraphs is an incredible source of information that is absolutely free and that I highly recommend you guys checking out. That is where I'm going to get all of my pitcher information. In addition to all of that, once you gather that information, you're going to want to split it and buy that pitcher splits, meaning that pitcher versus lefties and that pitcher versus right-handed at-bats. That's very, very important as we progress throughout the day and progress throughout this actual strategy to understand where their struggles are by each handedness. Step 2, we're going to pull team lineup data versus that particular pitcher's handedness. So for example, if you have a left-handed pitcher for Milwaukee pitching and they're playing the Cubs, you want to pull out the information on that Cubs lineup. You want to take that team, the Chicago Cubs, and their batting statistics versus left-handed pitchers. That's very, very important. Again, it kind of works two ways here. You're going to understand that pitcher versus that particular lineup, but you're also going to possibly flip it and understand that that pitcher struggles versus a particular lineup. Let's say the Cubs are really, really good versus lefties. You may want to consider stacking. So we're starting to see a little bit of the batter side of it being incorporated here. But in general, step 2, you're going to pull that team lineup data versus that particular pitcher that starting pitcher that they're going to face in his handedness, and then go from there. Now, again, utilize fan graphs that have, I'm going to go through it here in a minute. Again, free source, team batting data is all available freely to you guys to pull. You can even sort it. You can create your own categories, things like that. You want to use fan graphs for that team batting data. Unless you want to use another source, feel free. But again, we're talking about my strategy and what I implement here. You want to review the team batting stats versus the pitcher's handedness. Again, all of that can be split out in fan graphs, easily accessible. Step 3, you're going to review Vegas odds and implied team scoring totals. Pretty self-explanatory here. Vegas comes into play in all sports, but is very, very important in baseball in itself. You can figure out projected runs to be scored, team/pitcher win percentage odds, and pitcher strikeout props. All of those, including many, many more, which I'm not going to fill in here, but you want to use Vegas in general. You don't want to take a pitcher against a team that's projected to score 8 runs. Does that make sense? Absolutely not, because he's going to probably get beat up if Vegas is right. You may want to take a pitcher, though, that is projected, an over-under of 10 strikeouts, a really high total there. Strikeouts are king in DFS. That may be something you're interested in. So you want to pull all of that data next. You want to also, in step 4 here, start to verify the weather. Kevin Roth on Twitter, definitely worth a follow if you're serious about DFS baseball. In addition to that, Roto Grinders, which works with Kevin Roth, they have a great weather page. It's going to have his write-ups, what to be expected, because again, this all relates more towards the pitcher side of anything, if anything, but in general, you want to know, what's the weather like? Where's the wind blowing? Is it blowing in, which is more pitcher friendly? Is it blowing out, which is more hitter friendly? Is it cold? Pitcher friendly. Hot, humid, hitter friendly. All of that's going to come into play. Is it in a dome? Is it outside of a dome? You could even incorporate where they're playing at this particular stage. And that's going to, again, help you narrow down your pitchers, which is the next step. So at this point, after you've collected all of that data, you want to narrow down your starters and your team stacks. This is where you utilize, again, again, steps 1 through 4, all of that stuff you've accumulated. Maybe you have 8 or 9 pitchers you like, and then you start to review Vegas odds, and then you're down to 6 or 7, and then you start to review the weather, and then you're down to 4 or 5. You want to determine which pitchers, and it can be a bunch at this stage, but which pitchers you're interested in starting. You're going to also determine which pitchers you want to attack or stack against at the same stage, because throughout this research at this stage, again, you're very, very heavily focused on pitchers, but that's also going to lead you to which teams or which teams you want to actually take against a pitcher on the flip side, building out your stacks. Now, again, there are a lot of different things you can fit in throughout this process. I haven't talked about ownership. I haven't talked about salary. All of that's obviously going to matter as you build out your lineups here, who you can afford. Expensive pitchers are going to be the guys probably in better spots. Inexpensive pitchers are going to be guys probably in bad spots. But again, all of this needs to be built into and tailored to your own. I'm just giving you the kind of general idea of how I go about, figuring out what I'm interested in for a given slate or a given day. Step 6 here, you're going to find individual bats. So at this stage, you probably have your, let's call it 5 or 6 pitchers you're interested in starting. You're also going to have your 3, 4, or 5 stacks you're interested in putting up against other pitchers and building into your lineups. But at this stage, you're going to need some individual bats. You can go multiple stacks in a lineup, but more likely than not, you're going to need some individual bats to fill out your lineup. So this is step 6, where you're going to start to pull out value bats. Who's really cheap when they shouldn't be? Who's been called up that's maybe an interest to you? Who's a hot hitter, a streaky player currently, a guy that's on fire? Who's in a great individual matchup? Who mashes lefties and is, Nelson Cruz right now up as a righty up against a lefty that's pretty weak? All of that is coming into play in step 6 here. Last but not least, I'll mention it. I know a lot of people don't like it, but BVP, batter versus pitcher, there's a lot of stats out there you can use. I don't hate that stat. I always take a peek at it. If you have a guy that has 30 at-bats versus somebody, he may, give you some information here where you may or may not want to start him. So step 6 is you're going to start to round out your lineups or round out individual bats. You might get a dozen or so bats that you may want to fit into your lineups. Again, all things depending if you're going cash, tournament, 150 lineups, 2 lineups, it's all going to matter here. I'm not going to get to all of that, but in general, this is the strategy. And finally here, once you have all of that collected, and if you're doing 150 lineups, even if you're doing 10, 15, 20 lineups, you're going to want to try to use an optimizer. Run an optimizer and start to build out your lineups and then critique them, sub guys in, sub guys out, see what the optimizer's spitting out. That's step 7 for me always. I'm including my interested pitchers, so I will literally X out the guys I'm not interested in starting so that the optimizer doesn't just waste my time and I'm not wasting its time. I'm going to utilize stacking features. So I'm going to pick out the 3, 4, 5 stacks I actually like and see if they can be fit in nicely with the starting pitchers I'm actually interested in. And then you're going to like and lock individual bats. All of that's going to come into play here. But that's really the 1 through 7 step process that I implement on a given slate. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Hopefully it makes sense. This is my strategy. I am not saying it's going to be beneficial for you to use. I'm not saying it's going to work every single time, but it's what I'm comfortable with. I'm used to using it. It's been successful for me in the past. It's been easy to kind of rinse, repeat, and get the same sort of consistent, successful results out for me. But you're going to want to critique it. You're going to want to tailor it to what you're doing, what games you're playing, what types of tournaments or cash games, and just really how much time you have on your hands to do this. But hopefully this is helpful understanding the strategy. Next up, we're actually going to go to some websites. We're going to go to Fangraphs. I'm going to show you some stuff I've done for this particular slate, and we'll go to the optimizer and just see how many lineups we can actually build. All right, guys, welcome back here again. We're now into the actual nitty gritty. We're into Fangraphs here. We're going to start basically going through this strategy, these steps I just mentioned, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what I did for today. So this is opening day. Of course, we're already underway in terms of the start of the slate if you're playing on either really, but FanDuel, I believe, is all day. DraftKings is split up a little bit today. Nonetheless, it's underway already for today, and what we're going to do is just use today's slate as an example of how I went about it. It's a little bit easier. It's opening day. The starters that are on the mound are only for a select few teams, so we can kind of consolidate this and make it a little bit easier to digest for you guys. But as I mentioned, the first thing I'm going to do is actually list out my pitchers. And here on Fangraphs, as I mentioned in the previous video, you can create an account and you can literally save your reports. They call them custom reports. But what I'm doing here, and these are stats that I'm interested in, I will adjust these. I will, tailor tailor this as the season goes along, add stuff, remove stuff. Basically, this can be changed, basically, and you guys should be doing the same. But a lot of these are the stats I mentioned in the previous video. You have xFIP, you have WOBA, you have his strikeout percentage, his home runs per 9, all of that is built in here. And then what you're going to do literally is add your players. So I've already done it for the sake of the time of this video, but you can see here, Bieber, Brubaker, Bumgarner, all of these guys, you simply type their name in at the top here, you can add them and create a custom player list with your custom table of actual, statistics and data points you want, because otherwise you're just going to waste your time with a bunch of stuff and it's going to be hard to digest. But nonetheless, so I've done that already, and you can see this spit out all of those players and all of those data points I'm interested in. In general, right now, just so you guys know, we're talking about their splits versus lefties. I'll also do it for righties. I may also do it combined. But in general, this is the guys that are actually going to start today on opening day. One last thing I will mention to you guys, what I will do here, and because it's on 19, I'm actually going to just use the 2021 season. I'm only interested in stats from 2021. Obviously, we do not have stats for this upcoming, or for this current season. It's 2022. They haven't even played a game yet. You're not going to use spring training stuff. And for actually the next few weeks, because pitchers pitch every 5 days or whatever, you're not going to have a lot of stats for a while. And that's okay. You're going to have to rely on previous seasons. And that's, again, totally fine from a pitcher perspective. Just know, once they start to get 4, 5, 6 games under their belt, then you're going to want to transition into this season. What I will do typically, I will at some point, let's say all of these guys get a start under their belt, I will then adjust this for their next outing to be 2021 stats plus 2022. So I'll start to combine them and see what it spits out. But right now you have a lot of innings for these guys, which is what you want to see here. And you can see everything I talked about, xFIP, average, WOBA, all of that stuff, hard hit percentage, it's all built into what to these pitches for today and what I want to see. Now I'm going to take you guys very quickly over to what I do with that. So I basically export this stuff into Excel. We'll use Google Sheets for this video because it's a free option for you guys. But you can see here, I've exported all of this information for each individual pitcher for this slate into an Excel sheet. I have left and I have right, meaning that pitcher versus left-handed bats, that pitcher versus right-handed bats. And it's then broken down, and I basically put in conditional formatting. I'm not going to explain how all of that works, but it gives me a visual aid with the green, the yellow, and the red as to who's what on this particular slate. You can see here very quickly, Burns, and if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Tyler Mahle, those are the two guys that stand out versus lefties on this particular slate. They have a lot of green, meaning they're sort of towards the top of the echelon of pitchers versus lefties. Again, this is 2021 data, a lot of innings, 85, 93. These guys have really good strikeouts, over 10 per 9, strikeout percentages at 30+%, 35 for Burns, really good ground ball percentage, really good fly ball percentage, being that it's low. Home runs per 9, 0.32, 0.58. Hard hit percentage is 23.6% for Burns, which is really low. So obviously you don't want that to be high. But again, it gives me a quicker way to visualize which pitchers I'm interested in on this slate. Now, if you go down here to Tyler Miguel, if that's how you pronounce it, for the Mets, dude only has 40 innings, 39, which is concerning, meaning it can change very rapidly without a good sample size. But you can see here, he's lit up pretty much red everywhere. He gets hit really hard at almost 40%. He gives up almost 3 home runs per 9 innings. Again, all I'm doing here is going through each individual pitcher and figuring out who I'm interested in versus lefties, who I'm interested in versus righties. So you can start to visualize which pitchers are of interest for this slate. Same thing for righties. We're coming over to here now. Burns still stands out. He's going to be one of the best pitchers available, probably one of the most expensive pitchers on this slate available, but for good reason. His stats are really good versus right-handers, still holding a really high K percentage at 36%. Only a 215 WOBA versus him as a right-handed bat. He's been really good. Shane Bieber versus righties, really good. Again, Patrick Corbin, a lefty, which is incorrectly marked here, but a lefty for Patrick Corbin, almost lit up completely red here, which makes sense because he gets hit hard by right-handed bats. So just to kind of give you guys a visualization of what we're doing here with pitchers, I'm starting to researched them, started to figure out who stands out versus lefties, who stands out versus righties. More importantly, can I combine the two? Corbin Burnes is definitely a guy that's standing out to me versus what would be the Cubs today, and I'm sure he's in a good spot considering everything I've seen so far. Now, next step, I'll start to do the same thing with bats. I want to know which players or which teams are good against which type of handedness pitcher. There is a huge caveat for this. This is the start of the 2022 season. We do not have any data available for 2022, meaning we have to go back to 2021, just like we did for pitchers. The problem is with pitchers, it doesn't matter. You're looking at one individual player, so you can go back to 2021 and get some decent information on that pitcher, some decent data points that you can rely on. The problem with bats, though, we're focusing on teams now, and teams change year over year. We now have a DH built into both the AL and the NL. So be very, very careful. I'll still look at this. I think it's still a good example because it's going to show the process I go through, and this will be much better later in the season. But you want to understand really 2022 data for the Angels, for Baltimore, for Boston, things like that. So right now, again, we are set up versus left-handed pitchers. You're starting to see which teams really, really were good against left-handed pitchers. Houston, Toronto, St. Louis, Chicago White Sox, and the Washington Nationals all were really, really, really good versus left-handed pitching in 2021. Have a WRC plus as a team over 100 being sort of the average here, but generally a really good team. You can see which teams aren't striking out. 18% for Houston looking like a really good team if you want to attack a left-handed pitcher. ISO, basically how much power does a team generally have? St. Louis, Toronto, Dodgers, Atlanta, Houston again. Houston just keeps coming up, right? They're a team that you want to attack left-handed pitchers with if you have a weak lefty especially. But you can also flip this, right? You can understand here, Miami had the highest strikeout percentage versus left-handed pitching. They also had an 80, which is one of the worst teams in baseball, WRC plus. So if you're looking at a particular pitcher, you want to cross-verify versus the team he's pitching against. How did they do? How did they fare in the data points you have versus that particular handedness? So again, I'm collecting all of this data for these teams and figuring out which teams I may want to stack, which teams I'm definitely not going to stack, I'm going to take a pitcher against, things like that. We're going to go back to the spreadsheet here. And I apologize, I'm moving as quickly as possible here, but I believe this information is good for you guys to hear. This is basically how I break it down, and I would imagine a lot of other people do. Now, you can pay for this information probably in a way that's going to put it all in front of you. You can probably set up your own, systems to spit this stuff out to you guys. I still do it very manually. It takes a little bit of time, but it is a way that I feel comfortable in employing it when I'm setting my lineups and picking my players. But back here, we're back now just to the bats tab. So I've basically copied everything over you want to see. Take, for instance, today, Corbin Burnes is facing the Chicago Cubs. So he's a right-handed pitcher. That's what I've put here. The Cubs as a team, how have they fared versus righties? Bad. I mean, just bad. Corbin Burnes is in an excellent spot today versus the Cubs. So you're looking at, they're ranked 19th with a 307 WOBA. They're ranked 23rd in WRC plus, 12th in ISO. So they're above average in ISO. They're number one in strikeouts versus righties at 27.10%. At hard hit, basically middle of the pack. So I am definitely, if I'm setting lineups today, I'm definitely interested in Corbin Burnes versus the Chicago Cubs. Again, though, the big caveat is who is new on the Cubs. They're missing Baez. They're missing Bryant. They're missing a lot. Rizzo. A lot of key players from that lineup are obviously gone for the Cubs. So this isn't a perfect formula yet, but it will be in the next few weeks, a month or two down the road, when you can just use team data, team batting data for the 2022 season. Nonetheless, this is the stuff we want to look at. Shane Bieber for the Cleveland Guardians. Right-hand pitcher. How did KC do versus righties? Not very good. The only thing they kind of have going for them is they don't strike out a lot, which may be of interest to you as you're picking your pitcher. But all of this stuff is information that you want to focus in on. Houston versus Ohtani. Ohtani's a great pitcher, but he's facing a team that's really good versus righties. In fact, they're 4th overall in WOBA. They're number 1 in WRC plus, number 9 in ISO. They're 29th, meaning they don't strike out a lot at 20% in terms of strikeout percentage. And they're 10th in hard hit percentage. So maybe you're not interested in him. But in general, this is what I'm going to do. So again, I'm going to try to take a team that is built out of this particular analysis, stack several batters from some of these teams that definitely are in a good spot based upon the numbers. But in addition to that, I'm also going to cross-verify the pitchers I'm interested in. So I use Burns as the example. I liked him from the first two tabs. He was really good versus lefties, really good versus righties. But in addition to that, the Chicago Cubs, according to this chart, are not very good, right, versus righties. At least they weren't in 2021. We'll see how it plays out, but that's what it's looking at here. Now, on the flip side, maybe a team I want to stack today is the San Diego Padres. I think that was a team I'm actually interested in. They're facing Madison Bumgarner, a lefty. Downside is the Padres are using, again, 2021 data. Tatis Jr. is out for the Padres, but I still believe they're a pretty good team versus left-handed pitching. But again, I'm looking at it and maybe not so much. So 13th in WOBA, 24th overall in WRC plus. Their numbers are not great. The only thing, again, they have going for them is that they are basically bottom third of the league in strikeout percentage. They don't strike out a lot. So not a whole lot that actually looks good here from a stacking perspective. Possibly one of these two. If you're interested in Milwaukee, which I think was a team I was interested in, they are, I guess, quote unquote, the best looking team in terms of 2021 batting team data versus Hendricks, a guy that, if we go back to some of this information here, versus lefties, if you look and find Hendricks here, not very good, right? Not very good versus lefties. Milwaukee has several lefties in their lineup. I know they have Yelich, players like that. So definitely guys you may be interested in general. But again, hopefully this information is helpful for you guys. So you can see those first two steps are vitally important that we talked about earlier. You're going to break down the pitches for a given slate. You're going to break down the bats on a particular slate. You're going to kind of cross compare the two against one another. And ultimately, you're going to narrow down the set of pitchers that you are interested in, as well as the set of teams and stacks that you're interested in taking against pitchers. Now, I mentioned there's some other steps here in between. One of those being you want to look at Vegas totals and look at weather. Well, if we go over here to Roto Grinders, again, I talked about this in a previous video, a really good source to just really easily look at some of that information. So you're looking here at because the games have already started for the day, but the Guardians and Royals, 7.5 over under, not a lot of points projected or runs projected for either team. As we scroll down here, 4.57 projected for the Cardinals, so that's a little bit of a higher total compared to some of these other teams. In addition to that, over here, you have the Nationals and the Mets at 9. Both of those teams projected over 4. But in general, not a whole lot. It's opening day. Not a whole lot of runs being scored or projected to be scored on the slate. Possibly the Braves at 4.86. Although they have lost Freeman, they don't have Acuna Jr., but they do have Matt Olson now in that lineup. They do have some pop with some of those bats. So again, all things you want to consider here. You're trying to pick out, hey, I have these stacks that I identified early on, regardless of Vegas, regardless of weather. Now match them up. Oh, wow, they're projected to score a lot of runs. That's a good combination. You may want to set that team aside. You're just sort of narrowing it down. On the flip side, I like these 3 or 4 pitchers without looking at anything else. Now I'm looking at projected totals against them. Holy cow. Let's say you liked Wainwright. 3.43 is a really low number of runs projected to be scored by the Pirates. So again, maybe now you like Wainwright even more. You're sort of locking in players from both aspects there. You can also look at weather. You can go to the top here. You can go to MLB weather, and you're going to see a nice breakdown of all of these games. I will tell you tonight, the New York Mets and Washington game is starting to look bad. It's completely yellow. It's really nice how they categorize this here, but all things you want to consider. Cincinnati, Atlanta, Houston and LA, both of those teams look like, or both of those games look like they're really good from a weather perspective, at least relative to this particular slate. So again, you want to verify your pitcher's not going to be a guy that's going to lose because he's only going to go 2 innings and the game gets delayed, or it's going to be wet or something like that. So consider weather as part of your analysis here as you break everything down. And then ultimately you're trying to narrow down to those particular stacks and those pitchers. Last but not least here, you want to potentially want to look at batter versus pitcher. You can see here who's hot, who's cold. Wainwright has been really good versus the Pirates. I know this personally. I'm a Pirates fan, but he has had, a good history against them in the past, and we talked about him already being in a good spot. But in general, you can see some of these players like Colton Wong versus Hendricks. I talked about potentially attacking Hendricks with Milwaukee. Well, he has a good history. He's hitting 356 and 45 at-bats. He has a home run, several extra base hits. He could potentially be an individual bat you're interested in. Will Myers versus Bumgarner. A lot of home runs, 6 home runs, although not a good average. But in general, again, implement all of these different tools as you build out your lineups. So let's bounce over now to a lineup optimizer. I always recommend Daily Fantasy Nerd. If you guys haven't checked them out, please look down in the description below. It's my favorite optimizer. I tout them each and every video, not because I receive a kickback or I work with them directly. It's literally, it is the actual optimizer that I use in my daily fantasy sports research, both from a football and MLB sense. And I will say, MLB is where I started. MLB is where I found Daily Fantasy Nerd, and I've stuck with them ever since. But again, we won't spend too much time here. I will actually utilize this site when we break down particular lineups for a slate, but let's talk about how I would implement that. So we're going to come over here to the pitchers. That's the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to look at all the different pitchers, and I'm going to start Xing out. I didn't like Hendricks. I do not want to start Hendricks. I do not want to start, let's say, Valdez. I do not want to start Greinke. You can see I'm eliminating the guys I have no interest in actually starting. I may give a thumbs up to Burns because he's one of my favorite pitchers on the slate. I may do the same thing with Brubaker or Darvish or Beaver. These guys are guys I'm definitely interested in taking, right? But that's kind of how I'm going to narrow down the pitchers based on everything we had already talked about. I have a good understanding. And then I'm going to go over to hitters. There may be individual players I like. All of this information here is available to you guys too. But you can see runs scored. Milwaukee was definitely the team with the highest projected total on this slate at 5.08. So if you're not using roto grinders and you do sign up for this particular optimizer, you're going to get all of that Vegas information. You're going to get some weather information available to you guys. Do I recommend you stick exclusively to this? No, you should utilize all resources available. But again, you can see here, and the lineups are locked in. So anytime it's highlighted in green, that means there are lineups, and you can see the order in which the players are projected to hit. Not even projected, they are actually confirmed to be in that lineup. So let's take Milwaukee, for example. If I wanted to stack Milwaukee today, because that is a team that I've identified with, you go over here to the stacking feature. I'm going to hit 4, meaning I want a minimum of 4 players from Milwaukee in my lineup. I'm going to hit basically, and this is set up for FanDuel, I'm going to hit optimize, and I'm going to see what this spits out. So we got Corbin Burns plus 4 players from this lineup, and that includes a 1, 2, 3 with Yelich, and then Tellez, the catcher or first baseman, who hits 5th. And it's going to fill in the rest here. We got 2 San Diego players that we obviously talked about earlier. We like San Diego as a stack from some of our research. We have JD Davis from New York Mets. You may want to not consider any Mets Washington because of the weather, but nonetheless, you see how it works out. We've eliminated basically all the nonsense. We've gone through the weeds. We figured out which pitchers we want to narrow down to, which stacks we want to narrow down to, and then we're going to start optimizing lineups. We're going to start putting in bats. Put in Mike Trout. Who doesn't want to start Mike Trout ever, right? But in general, this is the process, guys. It is a little bit of a lengthy video. But you can see a lot of time does go into this, into picking these picks. So not only can you implement this yourself, but you should also ensure that you tailor it to what you like. If there's stats that you think I'm using that are just stupid, don't use them. Call me out on them. Leave me a comment down below, but build it out yourself. Use your own Excel sheets, figure out what you do like and don't like, and hopefully you guys will find and tailor a strategy that works for you guys on a consistent basis, because that's what it's all about. It's not about winning every day. I would love to, you would love to, but quite frankly, you can't. It's just not possible. It's not how DFS works, and it's especially not how baseball MLB DFS works. You just want to put yourself in the best position possible to capitalize when it's time, and you will do it. Trust me, you will win consistently if you put the time and the effort in. And again, you want to check out optimizers such as Daily Fantasy Nerd, but feel free to check other ones out. I have no reason to suggest to only use Daily Fantasy Nerd, but if you do, click my link because it's an affiliate link. But nonetheless, I'm trying to help you guys out. Leave me some comments, anything I may have missed, or if these videos are useful, not useful, just leave me some comments down below. Outside of that, that's really all I got for you guys. Hopefully this video wasn't too excruciatingly painful in getting through this, but actually helps you guys build out what could be a successful strategy from your end. It's been, again, really successful for me, but I will continue to tailor it as the season goes along, adjust it, use 2022 data, things like that. I'll leave you guys with that. Again, hopefully helpful for you guys. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Give these videos a like. I do put a lot of time and effort into them, and I will continue to put out MLB content because this is my favorite sport to play DFS through. So I'll put out specific videos where we utilize the optimizer. Look out for some YouTube short videos on days that I won't put out a full-length video, and let's roll with it. Let's have a great season. Let's look forward to this 2022 season, a real season actually. We've had some delays and some obviously worldwide issues that have caused previous seasons to kind of be lackluster, but we're back here with baseball. We're back with hopefully some normal baseball, and let's get it cracking here and win some money. I wish you guys the best of luck as this season kicks off. I hope you're enjoying the Masters. I hope you're enjoying the actual opening day of baseball, and again, wish you guys the best of luck. I will catch you in the next video.